Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Brass Junkies. I am your host, Andrew Hitz, and I am joined by my inspiration for basically all of the artistic output I've had in the last 10 years. You could really credit it all to Lance LaDuke. So, Lance, how are you?
Greetings, podcast listeners. No
good.
frame of reference. Just like hitting you with a thing right off the bat. Oh, my goodness.
There you go. So
I'm wonderful. Thank you for asking.
Oh, Lance, you want to hear something funny?
I don't. Nope.
So, well, then you should listen to the rest of this podcast. No, as you're going to hear, Donna she didn't try to keep things serious. She's just like she's
just like a nice person. Yeah.
Donna Parks is our guest today, who is a phenomenal trombone player in Louisville, Indiana. Well, you'll hear that joke here in a few minutes. But in the Louisville Orchestra in Kentucky, and as you will hear right away, she's not from around here. So, but she's awesome, and it really was an honor to have her. But Lance, what I wanted to tell you was that my wife was speaking with one of her colleagues here in Fairfax County. His name is Brad, and first of all, Brad said, yeah, I really should. He said that he listens to us all the time when he's commuting to and from school. He said, I really should become a Patreon patron. I really need to get around to just doing that. And yeah, Brad, come on, Brad. Let's go, Brad. Come on, Brad. It's a buck. So, yeah, I know how much you make, Brad. It's like it's publicly knowable information. So you just need to give us $1. So, but anyway, no, but this is the part that's going to make you laugh. Is that that Brad was talking about? He mentioned the podcast to Tiffany, and who it's my wife. She never listens. She gets in quotes to hear me tell stories all the time, and she's just like, these were semi-charming, maybe a little bit when we first started dating, like the first week, and that was in like 2003. So, but anyway. And Brad was talking about the podcast, and he goes, and he interrupted himself. He goes, "Oh yeah," he said, "Wait, how are Lance's pipes?" Because
we never went back, did we?
Right? And Tiffany said, "Wait a minute, you left the listeners thinking that his pipes might have been frozen and that like his whole house was underwater, and then you never updated them." She said, "That's not very nice."
That's true. She's right. I'm so Lance, sorry.
I'm not speaking in code. How are your pipes?
Well, our pipes are wonderful. So what had happened was the feed to the dishwasher froze. And so we actually learned that it was probably installed incorrectly in the first place. And so we've made the necessary improvements and upgrades, and we should be good to go moving forward. Thank you so much for your concern, especially you, Brad.
I'm trying to remember which episode it was that we were recording. That it was a couple of batches ago. It might have been Chip Krotz.
Could have been. That
might have been
right.
Deanna. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah. So, but it was one of the last like 5 or 6 episodes where all of a sudden Lance just disappeared. So, and there was one part where it was like, it was like I had asked enough questions, so I kind of waited for Lance, and then like there was no question, and then I just asked another one, and then and that's when I saw in the note field like gotta go. So yeah, that was funny, and then he came back, but yeah, we never gave the people the update. So, and then I told my wife the story that you shared on the podcast about the time that you were trying to run like 15 or 20 miles an hour, and that you face planted and all of that, and she
17.
She smiled and said, "Jackass."
Yeah.
So
17 miles an hour. Thank you very much.
Yep. There you go. So that was peak Lance as the iTunes reviewer who left. That was there we go. See that's like I'm a professional. I just segued. For those of you who have left a rating and a review on iTunes, thank you so much. That is by far the best concrete way, other than supporting us through Patreon, that you can help the show and help other people discover it. Someone left a review. I don't have it up, but I think I read it once before, but the title was Peak Lance. It was 5 stars, and it said the fact that you had trying to impress your son and your girlfriend and her son. Like you ran and like face planted and like were bloodied, and that you waited until the show intro to share it with everyone. They were impressed. So
well, and Hannah was like, you're not built to run. You're not a runner. Don't run. Don't. Like if I start to jog across, no, you're not built to run. Don't.
I've always thought of you as the Usain Bolt of euphonium. So, but I guess maybe Hannah and I need to have that out. I've always seen you as a runner, so whatever that's worth. So, let's talk about the Pappert people.
Hey, you know what? I saw. You're going to hear this later, but as we're recording this, I'm playing with the PSO, and I saw Jim Nova on Thursday, and I was like, "Hey, man, sorry about the intros because he hasn't heard them yet."
Right.
When the first one I called him Twinkle Toes, and the second one I called him Bubble Butt. So I'll have to come up with. I'll try and make amends today. But anyway, so very, very special thanks to the Duquesne University School of Music, the Mary Pappert School of Music, who are sponsors of our show. And if you're interested in finding out about the brass programs, the ensemble opportunities, and the applied faculty in the Pappert School, you can click on the link below. And very, very special thanks to Jim Supernova. Probably the first time he's heard that. How about Jim Chevy Nova? Jim Durian Nova.
We also need to thank Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for the Brass Junkies. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model tuba mouthpiece and the Lance LaDuke Model euphonium mouthpiece. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com. That was awful. Or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So we mentioned Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/thebrassjunkies, then we record bonus episodes all the time. Each guest sticks around for a little bit of extra time, which is in the every week after the bi-weekly interviews. There is a bonus episode, the one with Donna. The three of us were laughing uncontrollably basically the entire time. We told one of the more disturbing stories from our time on the road with Boston Brass that involved it involved a bar and durian fruit and a birthing and Singapore.
Halloween.
And Halloween, yes. So it was Donna was in stitches. So which was good. And and so you can, by the way, when the day you become a Patreon patron, you can get access to all of the previous bonus material. We are also going to be throwing up. We've already got a bunch of things recorded.
We're not going to be throwing up. We won't be throwing up.
That was somehow not a part of that disturbing Boston Brass Singapore story. I don't know how, because it should have been. But we have a bunch of extra bonus material for everyone at the $3 and up level. Lance and I just recorded a brief mini episode of tips for forming a chamber group, and for whether that's a brass quintet or, well, we get into a lot of different things. So there's a bunch of stuff like that include playing tips and stuff that are going up for the $3 and up, but all bonus episodes for the podcast featuring the actual guests, which always there's a lot of laughing. Those are for any patron, and you get access to all of the back catalog of that the day that you become a Patreon patron. We're on our way to $100 an episode. When we reach that, what are we going to do, Lance?
We're going to play trumpets into microphones for your entertainment and horror.
We are going to record a trumpet album, which will probably, so that I can play the tuba again within a year, will probably be like 16 bars of famous trumpet pieces. J.D. Shaw, who is one of the him and Sam Palafian are the two brass arrangers that I put on a pedestal, like the best in the business. J.D. is going to do the arrangements for us, and it's going to be it's going to be something. So
if you want to suggest some tunes, we'll take them under advisement. No promises, but if you have an idea for a thing you'd like to hear us do, send us a note.
That's a good idea. That's a really good idea. Yep. You can reach us through the Pedal Note Media website, pedalnotemedia.com, or you can hit us up on Twitter at Pray the number 4 Jens. You can also find us on Instagram, which we're also at Pray the number 4 Jens. And you can find Lance on social media places at LaDuke. That's 3 laws and a Duke. And I am Andrew Hitz on everything except for Instagram. I'm Hitz Tuba. So that's I think that does it for all the announcements. I think people are going to really dig this conversation with Donna Parks of the Louisville Orchestra. And today on the Brass Junkies, we are joined by a phenomenal trombonist who has a resume that would take like the first 5 minutes of this interview just to read, and that is Donna Parks. Donna, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you guys?
We're doing well.
I'm cracking. Andrew took like an awesome breath at the beginning. It was like this. Trying to make this as creepy as possible.
Very dramatic.
Right out of the gate.
Hey, Lance, you remember that time when we were, I don't even remember where we were in Germany, where one of our trumpet players, whose name might be Jeff, got so drunk that he was over in the corner doing breathing gym exercises.
We called him the breathing Jeff.
Called him the breathing Jeff. Yes. So maybe that's what was inspiring me. So. And that was that night we were drunk dialing like famous brass players. Like we called Sam. Yeah, we called Sam. We called Jens. We called a lot of people. That was true. That was funny. Yeah, because everybody was up because it was like 5 hours later over there. Mm-hmm. So even though it was like 2 a.m. there, it was like 9 p.m. Eastern time. So yeah.
You're lucky not to have known us then.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
So Donna, why don't you tell everyone anyone who might not know what you do now? What is your current position?
So at the moment, I am principal trombone of the Louisville Orchestra here in Louisville, Kentucky, and I actually joined this orchestra in 2008. And I also play principal in the Colorado Music Festival, which is in Boulder, Colorado, and that's just in the summer during July and August. So that takes care of a good part of my year between the two things.
So it doesn't sound like you're originally from Kentucky. So where are you from?
Not. That is actually one of my favorite questions to ask when we do education shows. I love asking kids where they think I'm from, and I have them guess, and it's just the most fun. I've had so many wonderful answers, and my favorite of all time was this little girl raised her hand. I said, think a little further south, and this little girl answered, Indiana? No. So I like to call it the real South. I am from Canberra, Australia. So I grew up and was born and raised in Canberra, which is the capital. I love to tell people that because everybody tries to convince me that is in fact Sydney, which it's not. So yeah.
Wait, people try to convince you that
it's the best. They're like, no, I think it's Sydney. I'm like, I feel like I probably know this one.
And by people, you mean Americans, don't you? Yeah,
I do. Most Australians do know their capital. Most of the Americans, they're pretty convinced it's Sydney, but yeah, it is in fact Canberra. So yeah, I did my undergraduate at home at the Canberra School of Music, and then as most Australians do, at some point you need to sort of either come to the States or to Europe to do further study and to take the career to the next level. So I decided that America was the plan.
And where did you come here?
I moved initially to Chicago to study actually with Charlie Vernon at DePaul University. It was, I left in the middle of January, which I'm sure you guys are aware is summer in Australia and definitely not summer in Chicago. So I had never really seen snow or been around snow, and it was like the great blizzard of whatever that decade was. And it was quite a change.
Welcome to Indiana.
Yes.
Wait a minute. You're not
exactly.
Donna, yes. You're not even remotely close to old enough to be confusing decades. That's like something my father would be doing, who's like 77. Yeah, it's like
it was the most snow they'd had in, like some ridiculous number of years. Anyway, so I was up to my knees in snow, and I really did. I was like, what have I done? What have I done? Yeah.
I once heard there was a singer-songwriter named Willie Porter. I guess there probably still is. And I heard him interviewed on the radio one time, and he lives in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Right.
And he enough notoriety that he, like the interviewer said, well, have you considered moving like to Austin or to Nashville or someplace that's a little nicer weather and more of a music scene? And he said the winters in Green Bay are fantastic incentive to stay inside and practice.
I did practice a lot in Chicago. That is very true. That's very true. Yeah. It was a drastic change, but no, it was fantastic. And of course, for me coming to a city like Chicago, just with the amount of brass playing and just the sheer volume of music making happening was mind-blowing, coming from the size city that I was from. And the music scene in Australia is fantastic, but it's really small in comparison, of course. So it was overwhelmingly good. Yeah.
Here's an ignorant question, because all I have are ignorant questions.
Oh, good.
But in what other ways is the scene different there? I mean, you just talked about one aspect of it, but
I mean, I think in terms of the quality of what's happening, I think there's a lot of similarities. I just think it's a sheer volume factor for starters, but I also think there's just more proactivity in the culture here. So I think there's a lot more scope for you to create opportunity for yourself, and there's more of a market for that. And that's just my personal subjective opinion, but I do think there's a lot more scope to create more projects and do a wider range of projects in the States than there is currently in Australia. And that's probably market driven. There's just a larger market here, so that allows for more flexibility and more variety and more opportunity.
Do many players come over from Australia?
Yes, yeah. So a lot of players, when you're from Australia, because, we literally have 7 or 8 professional orchestras in the country, and the country is the size of the United States. So, that's not a huge number of jobs, and people do tend to get the orchestral position and stay in it. In Australia. So mostly when you graduate from undergraduate in Australia, you're looking around thinking, okay, can I further my study? Can I, audition overseas? And so a lot of people do go to Europe, and a lot of brass players have traditionally come to the States. And for me, the connection to the States initially was, of course, Mick Mulcahy, who was my teacher in high school when I was in Australia.
No kidding.
Yeah, I was a kid, and he was I had no idea, of course, at the time who he was or the magnitude of what I had access to at that point. But he was the connector. So he had come and had taken the job with CSO. So several trombonists from our studio had come over and sort of had lessons and spent time in Chicago. So that was a starting point for a lot of Australians. And actually there's been kind of a lineage now of Aussie trombone players who've come through Chicago and stayed and studied, or, come to other places in the States. But Mick was definitely one of the first people and one of the leaders who a trail of trombone players followed behind him.
The Trail of Tears.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, it was, and it's always when you make a move like that, and I look back on it now and I think, what on earth? I had so little money, and I quite literally had a backpack and my trombone, and I knew Mike and Mick and his wife Gabby, and I knew Charlie, and that was it. So,
wow,
that's a pretty good list. You've got a short list. That's the one to have.
It was a good list. Yeah,
I knew a mechanic from Spokane
and Uncle Frank.
He was a librarian. Oh yeah. What was her name? Joanne, I think.
So how old were you when you came here to the States?
I moved when I was 23. So I had finished undergraduate and had spent about a year freelancing in Sydney and loved it. Absolutely adore Sydney and playing in the Opera House and playing with the Opera and Ballet Orchestra and the symphony there. Phenomenal. And the Australian Chamber Orchestra, one of the best orchestras I've ever had the privilege to play with. But it really was looking down the road and thinking, what's the goal? The goal is to have an orchestra job of my own. And I couldn't see that path at that point in Australia. So for me, it was a chance to come and also to learn from the people you've heard about your whole life,
Sure.
I'd managed to get one lesson with Jacobs and one lesson with Kleinhammer. And I was just on the end of that, incredible era. So managed to squeak in with a few lessons, which was, incredible, absolutely incredible.
I had one.
What do you remember about those? Yeah.
Yeah, I had one with Jacobs as well, and it was life-changing.
I just remember sitting, the strongest memory for me is sitting outside Jacob's room in the arts building.
Mm-hmm.
in downtown Chicago, and just looking at the name on the door and hearing him teaching someone inside and just being like, oh my goodness,
what am I doing?
Yeah, like absolutely reeling at the fact that this was the Arnold Jacobs. And he was, of course, this gregarious, kind, incredible person, and who was amazing pedagogue. And I think that's something that you realize in retrospect, is that to find a player who is also that level pedagogue is rare, I think, in our business. And
for sure. Yes,
and
for sure.
To find someone who had that level of influence and that level of genuine passion for teaching as well as for performing was, it's a game changer for anyone who managed to get a lesson with him in person. I think it absolutely. I'm sure you guys feel the same way. You mentioned you had a lesson. I think it's a game changer for anyone.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's just influenced entire generations. Like it's
changed the entire course
of his students.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what about Kleinhammer? What was that like?
The same experience. Just these teachers who were so generous with their time and their attitude and their ability to pass on the information, and keep that tradition and that level of brass playing those were the guys that completely changed how it looked for everyone. So similar thing where it was kind of overwhelming and mind-blowing that you're just even in a room with them, let alone they're teaching you and you're playing for them,
Sure.
But yeah.
Do you remember any, was it more about get into the nitty gritty of it? Do you feel like they influenced your approach to sound or breath or buzz or all of it or positioning or like what?
I think air. I mean, that's the biggest thing, for me that was, and luckily I had someone like, I had fantastic teachers in Australia. So those concepts were already ingrained in me. But I think for me, hearing it from the source has a different level of impact.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely right. Air and moving it correctly and just the ease of using it in such a way that it's efficient. I think that was the biggest takeaway for me, for sure.
Do you teach?
I do.
Oh, go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I do. I've sort of gone through phases of different amounts of teaching in the different places I've lived. And right now I have a small private studio and I'm on faculty at the Catholic University here in Louisville. But I love teaching. I absolutely love it. And I find, though, with my schedule that if I take on too much, it kind of snowballs. I played with the Virginia Symphony, was my first orchestra gig here in the States. And I met a group of older gentlemen who were, I kid you not, in their 80s. And they had a trombone choir.
Wow.
No, you can't make this up. And
what were they called? What was the name of that band?
You know what? I'm trying to remember the official name of the group, but they were hysterical. I mean, and these gentlemen were all literally late 70s and 80s and very serious about this trombone choir. And they asked me to come and coach it, and these guys would have knockdown dragouts. I mean, when you're that age, you don't care anymore. You're just like, they would go at each other. I'd be like, guys, but it was so much fun because they just
give me my teeth back.
Yeah. They just loved it, and I love that the passion for it was so genuine, And so what happened was, then they all started taking private lessons with me, and it just snowballed, and I ended up with the average age of my private studio was like 85. But these guys were fantastic. They were so, and they really loved it and they were so excited about it. And yeah, so, but with the schedule that I have now, I'd like to have I love having a studio, but I think it's easy with private teaching for it to sort of get to the point where I don't feel like I can give everyone the right energy and the right time, so right. Yeah, but I love it. I really enjoy teaching.
Huh. I can't get past this trombone choir.
No, it's fantastic. They were awesome.
I'm this angry old men taking trombone choir super seriously. That's
super serious.
Awesome.
And someone
I'm going to be smiling about that
dynamic,
all day.
And they'd be
right.
like, they would let go on each other. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, okay, we're good. It was awesome.
The grumpy bones.
So this is that's how orchestras would talk to each other if they were allowed to, right? You just
absolutely
snap at Brett and say, "Do you see the staccato mark?" Yeah.
Seriously, the gloves were off. It was awesome. I loved it. Yeah, it was very fun.
I have to go backwards for a second because the one lesson I had with Jacobs, I went in and I was the 15,000th tuba player to play a Rochu etude for him.
Right.
And I started, I played it down, and he said, young man, he said, stick out your tongue. And so I stuck out, and I was like pretty nervous. I think that he did this intentionally to kind of to make me relax. I stuck out my tongue, and he said, "Whoa!" He said, "You have an enormous tongue, but I'm sure your girlfriend has already told you that." And at which point I completely I was like, "Oh, this is just a dude," It's there you go. Yep.
That's a good icebreaker.
And then that smashed the ice. So yeah. And then at that point, it was just kind of like it wasn't Arnold Jacobs in all caps. It was just a really. And then he had me getting my tongue out of the way and worked on the oral shape and then the sound and yeah, it was like it was. But that was that left a mark.
Yeah, that would.
I don't know how we didn't go into all sorts of awful areas just now. But thank goodness. Keep it moving. Nothing to see here, people. Just
once a year we take the high road here, and Donna, you were here for it.
That was it.
Yeah, you don't realize how lucky you actually are. So I want to know, you're 23 and you moved to not just another country, but to the city of Chicago, which is just huge. What was that scary?
I was so excited. I look back and I think, how was I not a little bit scared? But to be honest, I was so excited, and I had looked forward to that move, and I had worked so hard to be able to create that situation for myself that I was nothing but excited. And actually, the first night someone gave me this awful advice to stay in. I mean, it was basically a hostel, but the top couple of floors, there were a lot of people who had mental health issues. And I got to tell you guys, I got a shared trumpet players. Yeah. The tuba players were upstairs. So I was in the shared room because it was the cheapest option. I mean, I literally had no money, and I just remember lying there in this shared room, and I slept with my trombone in the sleeping bag with me because I was so concerned someone was going to steal my horn.
All right.
And
that's pretty good.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, this is not, this is not the lap of luxury right now. But
that Australian girl really loves the trombone. Yeah.
Well, I was like, what if someone steals my horn? So no, I mean, honestly, it was an adventure. I was just so excited. It was such an amazing adventure for me. And, you find your feet, and of course people that were lovely and so helpful and welcoming. And then I had another Aussie trombone player who landed in Chicago in the Trail of Trombone Players, about 6 months later. And so, you find community, and brass players are the best, they really look out for each other and they welcome you. And I remember thinking at that time, gosh, this scene is so enormous. I'm never going to know people and meet enough people. And gosh, isn't it crazy how the music world is just tiny? It doesn't matter where you are, literally in the world, the music world is tiny, especially brass players,
And getting smaller.
Yeah.
I mean, just with when I was coming up, there ain't no internet to go find out about what was going on anywhere else.
Right.
So now you can be aware of any scene anywhere.
It's incredible. And just how small the community is in terms of knowing people and it really is. It's an amazing thing. The music world never ceases to amaze me in that way. I think we forget to be grateful for that,
How many nights did you stay in this hostel with the trombone?
I was like, something's getting horribly wrong. So I think someone took pity on me. I met someone, and they're like, "Hey, you can stay a few nights." And then I found I started looking around for somewhere to live because, of course, I'd planned none of that, from abroad. So then I started looking for apartments, and it was so expensive. So I got this tiny little studio, with it. Basically, it's one room, and of course I have no furniture. So I'm like, people are giving me. Oh, it was hilarious. I mean, you look back and you just think, oh my goodness. But at the time, it was so much fun. It truly was. It was because I'd waited so long to create that sort of that part of the dream coming true. And I couldn't have been more excited, I remember, and feel free to laugh at this. I remember going out, taking my camera, because I didn't, of course, no smartphones at this point, my camera and taking photos of the snow. I printed these photos because for me, it was like, it was amazing. You know, I have photos of random people's houses with snow on them from Chicago.
In case this was like a fluke event in Chicago.
It was so exciting. Yeah.
My freshman year,
I teach at Carnegie Mellon, and kids, like, if it starts snowing, all the kids from overseas or from South, they all just run outside and look up.
I remember that my freshman year at Northwestern, it was the same thing where I was like, what the hell's everybody doing? And there was a few people, it was the first time they'd ever seen snow. I was like, I guess that makes sense.
To really be in, so at that point, honestly, everything was just so exciting. I didn't think you could have done anything to dampen my spirits, you know.
Lance and I have been to almost 30 countries together with Boston Brass back in the day, but we were always met by someone at the airport with a sign that said Boston Brass, and it was like, hey, idiots, get in this van, and then they would drive us to the hotel, and then they would check us in. And then
it's a little different.
They did everything other than brush our teeth for us before we went to bed, and then they told us,
you didn't get that? I had that. No, they did that for me.
The other thing I realized quickly when I landed in Chicago was just how much slang Australians use. I mean, we both speak English, right? It shouldn't be that challenging, but Aussies, we have so much slang. And I remember asking a woman at the airport for a trolley. Right?
What is this, Mr. Rogers?
And just these little things that you don't even think about, words that mean something completely different in this country, that you're like, oh, okay, that makes no sense to anyone here. Terrific. So the word for that is what? So realizing that despite the English commonality, there's still a lot of words that make zero sense.
How many people have asked you if you're British?
Oh, but you know what? I'll take it, because if they hear an accent, I'm happy, to be honest. I'm like, yes.
In Louisville?
Yeah. I'll take it. No, and you know what I think too, though? There's just not, growing up in Australia, you hear American television and you hear British television and you hear these accents all the time. But, here people they're not always exposed to so many accents, So I'm always just happy if they hear anything. I'm like, yes. I can be South African. I can be British. Whatever. That's fine. Sure. I'll
Canadian.
take it. Canadian. Yeah.
Do you go back to Australia often?
I do. I still miss it. And I have been back once a year, at least every year since I've lived away, actually. So mum and dad are still in Canberra, where I grew up, and I still have really good old friends there. And I do miss it still. So, yeah, I do go back.
Well, and it's such a short flight.
It's just a hop, skip, and a jump. No, the flight, and you know what? The flight gets worse. I thought the more I did it, it would get easier. You'd know, but no, you just know how horrendous it's going to be. You just know.
Oh, yeah. I've been to the dentist a whole bunch of times, and I don't go, oh, well, I've done this a lot. This won't be a problem. No, it's time for my physical again. Hey, that'll be fun. I've been through this. I have tried every variation of every airline, to try and get good deals on flights. And there's just the best way to do it. If you're an American and you want to fly to Australia, you live anywhere near Texas, they have a flight on Qantas from Dallas to Sydney. That is the way to do it. It's 17 hours, but then you are done. And you don't have to deal with West Coast, San Francisco, LA. Dallas, Sydney. It's the way to do it. Yeah.
Lance and I were once on a flight from Chicago to we were going to Hong Kong, and we had obviously flown. Each of us had flown to Chicago and had a long layover, and then so this flight was supposed to be like 12 hours and change, I think, something like that. And anyway, the pilot came on the intercom about 10 hours in and apologized and said that due to abnormally strong headwinds that we were low on fuel, so we had to make an emergency landing in Beijing. But we were not, no one on that plane was cleared to be in like mainland China. Right. So we landed, and of course you got to slow down and then speed back up. It ended up adding many hours, but we landed, and then they brought us to somewhere just on a runway way far away from the building, and we sat there while they refueled, which took over 2 hours. And then we kept flying. So we were on that plane for 20 hours.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
that was towards the end of both of our runs with Boston Brass, and we were both like, okay, we can
done.
Yeah, we're
done.
Exactly.
Done.
And scene.
I like that you're apologizing like you were some part of this. It was my bad. I'm so sorry. I was in the tower.
One of my most brilliant plans was to fly Air Fiji, because they had this sweet, cheap deal on Air Fiji. So I booked this ticket, but of course I booked all the legs separately because that's the cheapest way to do it. So I fit my domestic leg in America and then my Air Fiji flights and then my Australian flights. And of course my first flight out of Virginia was delayed by 4 hours, meaning everything is lost. And because I booked them all separately, no one is going to rebook me. I have to pay to rebook every flight. And the best part of this, so not only do I pay twice as much because I have to rebook every flight, but my trombone, at that point I was still checking it in a road case. And because the flight...
Really? You didn't sleep with it or put it...
Smuggle it in your sleeping bag?
Exactly. My sleeping bag. So I had checked my trombone on this domestic American flight, and because they were still going to take off at some point, she wouldn't let me take my horn off. And I was like, no, I'm not going to be on this flight. And she wouldn't unload my horn. So I was like, could you tell me which of these 17 cities I'm stopping in I should look for my trombone? So it was like LA, Nadi, and Fiji. It literally had 5 stops. And I was like, where is it going to end up? I mean, it was the most stressful travel because I had no idea where my trombone was going to be. I had to get off every flight, run to the baggage area and try and find my trombone.
Oh my God.
It was awesome.
Wait, see, now here's the difference, as if we needed to point it out, but the difference between you and us is that we tell you a story of horrible travel and you apologize. You tell us a story and we laugh and laugh and laugh.
Thank God that wasn't me.
Oh my goodness. No, I don't know if it's just a sheer numbers, but I'm renowned for travels just being a debacle. My horn, every time I go to Alaska twice a year, almost every time my horn gets lost or doesn't make it or goes somewhere else. And in fact, the brass players that I do my holiday gig with in Alaska have a hashtag, "Don't fly with Donna." It's fantastic. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So why are you going to Alaska?
Oh my gosh. So I have this, I go twice a year, and in the December it's a full brass ensemble, and we play, so it's a 1 concert holiday show. It's so much fun. And it started when they initially played a concert to open a hall in Sitka, Alaska. And if you don't know where that is, check it out. It's this tiny little barrier island in Alaska. And they opened a hall there. So they had all the guys from San Francisco actually went and played this brass concert. And the audience and the community loved it so much, they made it an annual event. So now we go every December and we play a holiday show up there. It's a lot of fun.
I've connected through there.
I remember Andrew and I went there, and the first time I went to Alaska with the band, our host greeted us and said, "Hey, you're in luck. It warmed up. It's 0."
It's so beautiful there, though, and
it really is. Yeah,
the people are amazing, and so then the other opportunity to go is in the summer. There's a fine arts camp that I teach at, the Sitka Fine Arts Camp, and that's in. They do weeks of different camps for different school age, and normally I do the middle school camp, and that's 2 weeks. So I go up in the summer, and it's a totally different place in the summer, of course, but it's a wonderful fine arts camp. The kids come from all over Alaska, but all over the States, and yeah, I love it up there.
Wow. So you were just in Australia last month, right? Was that last month?
I was. Yeah. It was in January, yes.
January. What were you doing?
I was getting married.
What?
Yes. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It really was fantastic. We had a really small group. We had 24 guests come, and it was a mix of our friends and family here from the States and, our nearest and dearest at home in Australia. But it really, really was a wonderful day. Couldn't have been more fun. Loved it.
And where did you get married?
We got married in Canberra, my hometown, in the Australian National Gallery has a beautiful sculpture garden, and they have a lot of the eucalyptus trees and beautiful big Australian trees in the sculpture garden. So we got married outside in the garden.
Wow.
On a beautiful sunny day. It really was. It's fantastic.
I saw some of the pictures you posted. Everything looked perfect.
It really was. And I kept thinking, stuff's going to go wrong and that's okay. And then nothing did. And I was like, okay, good deal.
Wow.
That was Lance's experience actually with his entire marriage. So, yeah.
Totally. Yeah, never a bump.
Notice I put that in past tense. So, but moving right along.
Moving right along.
She'll find you, Andrew.
Lance, maybe you should have been married in Australia. Maybe that was
See
the
that?
link.
Yeah. Yep. Canberra or the capitals, Sydney. It's somewhere. So, can you talk to us about what does a typical week in the like schedule wise? Just kind of give us a behind the scenes what a typical week in the Louisville Orchestra looks like.
Our orchestra is one of the orchestras that does multiple roles. We have multiple roles here in the city. So we do our regular symphonic concerts, but we also do opera and we also do ballet, and we also have a large commitment to education. So to be honest, there is no average week, but there is usually a mix of either we're doing a symphonic concert or opera and ballet, and then usually I'll have one or two education concerts, and those are voluntary that we go out in chamber groups and play in the community either for schools, or we also have a really neat program now where we go and play for different parts of the community. It might be a homeless shelter, it might be a school for youth. Lots of different ways to just connect with different parts of the community. So an average week would be either rehearsals and concerts for symphony or opera, and then a mix of educational or community performances as well.
I actually didn't realize cool. that you guys did all of that stuff. That's
Yeah, and it's not, we usually do 4 or so operas a year, so it's not, it's not throughout the whole season. And same with the ballets, it's usually, depending on the season, 3 or 4 ballets during the season as well. So, but I actually really enjoy that because it's a really nice balance to be able to do those other things in conjunction with the regular symphonic concerts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you don't get too bored doing one thing. It sounds like.
What stuff do you guys have?
And do you have to deal with any of the organizational stuff, or you just basically this is what's up this week?
This is our schedule. We in terms of the groups that go out to the community, we usually have one musician who is in charge of the group, but that's not any of the organizational. That's just making sure musicians know when and where and turn up on time, which in and of itself can be a challenge. But no, the rest is all handled by the orchestra. And I really hope we keep moving in that direction, because I do think that we owe it to our communities to play a larger role. And I think more of our community should have access to the orchestra. And I like that our organization is doing that, and I hope we keep building on that, because I think those performances are sometimes the most meaningful for me as a musician.
So, not to get you to speak ill of any of your colleagues, but how many of your colleagues share that opinion that that this is a good thing?
I think everyone shares the opinion that's a good thing. I don't know that everybody wants to participate. Right. It's not everybody's niche, sure. And I think that's okay. I think musicians have different strengths, and you certainly don't want to send people out in the community who don't, who aren't engaged and don't want to interact, because I think, that can be a negative. But I think with our orchestra, I don't know the numbers on how many, because for us it's additional pay, but it is voluntary. So you're never, assigned those things. You have to volunteer to be a part of those programs. But I would say probably a third, maybe a half of our musicians are a part of those programs in some way or the other, which I think that's great. And I do think that, like I said, I don't think it's not everyone's comfortable doing that, but I think everybody believes in the mission that we need to have, wider access to a greater a greater number of people in the community. So I think it's really important that we do it.
Yeah. Amen.
Well, yeah, I think it's vital for it to remain, and in some instances become significant in
Absolutely.
2018 or whatever year this is. It's what doing things because we've always done it that way is not a very good strategy.
I agree. And I think especially with the education shows, because you're dealing with a generation now who some of them have never seen a live musician. I mean, that's hard for us to wrap our heads around. But there are kids who every piece of music they have access to is digital. And some of them don't even make the connection that, that music is played by a human being, So I think it's even, if anything, I think it's even more important, and especially for the educational side of it, for getting out and being in the schools and giving kids access to it. And especially now that schools are cutting arts funding in so many places, it's not a given. We had phenomenal music programs growing up in primary schools in Australia and elementary schools. And that's just not the case for so many kids now. So I think, if anything, it's even more important now than it was for us that we're out there doing those programs.
Yeah. Otherwise, where are they going to get it?
So you have played
Absolutely.
with, I mentioned at the very beginning about how long it would take to read your bio, but you played an entire season with the Utah Symphony.
I did.
I actually...
Were you there with Jim Nova?
He was before me. He had already moved on to Pittsburgh at that point, but Larry Zolkind was there the season I played. That was such a fun season. Absolutely loved it.
I studied with Gary Offenloch for a year when I was 14, which explains a lot of my idiosyncrasies. So, yes.
No, I had such a fun season.
You're idiot, what?
It really was. It was such a fun season. That orchestra sounds fantastic. I mean, their conductor now I loved working with him. I think he's phenomenal. So, yeah, that was a very, very fun season for sure.
You also played a season with the San Francisco Symphony.
I did, yes. That was... I've
heard of them.
That low brass section, I almost felt after that season, I was kind of like, wow, I mean, where do you go from there? I had, that had been my role model section forever. And I have so much respect for them. And not only as a section and the sound, the quality of sound that section makes and the ease and the beauty with which they play, but they are the nicest people. They truly, and I know everyone says that, but they really are. They are some of my favorite human beings. And I just feel so privileged to have had, a full season with them, honestly.
That's awesome. You've also played with the LA Phil, the London Symphony, the Oregon Symphony, National Symphony, Baltimore Symphony, Singapore. Again, I'm skipping some. I'm like, how have you been able to, you play your tail off, but how are you able to get that many gigs all over the world?
I say yes. I say yes to everything. I think from the beginning I had that attitude of, I'll take any opportunity and I'll get out there and I'll do my best and see what happens. And I think, honestly, playing well is an important part of it, but I think being flexible and being a good colleague is a huge part of that, to be honest. I think I enjoy people and I love working with different people, and I just find it so much fun to play in different sections. And I think that has a lot to do with people wanting to work with you. I think you have to sound great, but I think, being able to come in and being flexible and being someone who can sit down in a section and make it work quickly, I think is a skill that I really love. That's one of my favorite things, is being in a new environment and figuring it out quickly and making, it happen quickly. That's something that, it's really fun.
Is that a thing you've always been able to do? Was that... you're talking about kind of reading the room and reading the environment.
I think it has something to do with getting to do it a lot too. Being exposed to really different environments, I think makes you more malleable and makes you quicker to react. But I think also it's a personality thing. I actually genuinely enjoy difference, and I enjoy people, vastly different people. And I think that has a lot to do with it, because it makes you open to being supportive of whatever the environment around you is.
What if you were talking with somebody who their default was to be a little more standoffish? I don't mean rude. I just mean they're less comfortable, or they were afraid in those social environments. Well, how would you advise them?
I think trying to be open and trying to just do the listening in any situation. I think that's the key. You don't even need to be the overt sort of, extrovert to make it successful. I think you need to be a good listener, and not just musically, but with people. You just need to be able to really hone in and hear what people are saying and how they're saying it, and learning to be more flexible. You don't have to be a huge extrovert. I think you just have to be flexible.
Why do you think you're good at that?
I think personality just has a lot to do with it. I think that, like as I said, I just personally enjoy difference in people. But I think the different experiences have given me, and I really truly believe this, that you put yourself in environments that you're uncomfortable with, and it's you're out of your comfort zone. You can't help but become stronger. You mightn't realize it at the time, but there's no question that you become stronger and more confident just by being there. Even if it doesn't work out well, or you don't think it's a success, the fact that you put yourself in that environment makes you a stronger person, makes you a better musician. And
they're working
absolutely. And I will insist on this, that for anyone who hasn't lived in a different city, country, environment, do it, even if it's just for 1 year of your life, because if nothing else, it gives you that sense of confidence and perspective, and it absolutely changes the way you see the place you're from as well, and more importantly, the way you see yourself. And I think for me, just literally jumping in the deep end, as I did by moving over here, you have no choice but to be, you've got to make it work. And I think there's that the confidence and the skill set that gives you is irreplaceable.
Totally agree. I've never lived outside of the U.S., but nothing has impacted my perspective more than travel, than being around other people.
And being, for me, literally, like, put me in a place where I can't speak the language and everything is totally foreign and crazy. That's when I'm the happiest. I just find that fascinating. I really do. And I understand that that's not everybody's cup of tea. But I do think for musicians, in terms of this flexibility and being able to play in different environments, being brave enough to try it. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to move to the Middle East. Go to a different city, play with some different players, just being in an environment that you're not as comfortable with. That's all it takes.
Get out of your comfort zone. Yeah, there's a famous Mark Twain quote, which is, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime." So,
I couldn't agree more.
I do. I
can't believe you
have most
that.
quotes memorized.
That's really good.
I don't know if it was audible or not, but in case it was, I need to explain, because you said that you really enjoy differences in people, and I snorted because I laughed because what instantly popped into my head was, well, that's not very 2018 of you. So, but there was. So,
I know I am definitely going against the grain right now.
You're a little lost, but that's okay. So, yeah.
One of my best experiences in an interesting way was, I don't know if you all have heard of that orchestra in Doha in Qatar in the Middle East. I don't know if it's still existing, but they actually auditioned internationally for this orchestra. So that money, that country has more money than they literally know what to do with. So they're like, let's start an orchestra. And they started a full-time European style, symphony orchestra. And mostly the musicians were from Europe, but there was one American. And that one American, of course, was a trombone player, James Kent. I don't know if you guys know of James or he's now living and working in Europe. But he was the one American in this orchestra. And he was working over there, and he said, look, one of my colleagues is going to take a couple of weeks off. Would you want to come and play? And, of course, you know, my theory of yes was, of course, I'll come play. And that was, you know, that was fascinating and just so completely different. But and you know, a place that I would not want to live, you know, for many, many reasons. But to go and to live and work there for just a short amount of time was absolutely fascinating. And the best part of it was, of course, I got there and the management was Arab, and there was a German manager who was there. And they were deeply confused because they assumed I was going to be a man.
Oh, boy.
And it wasn't. But it was too late because I was already there and I was playing. But, you know, it was, it was fascinating. And just, you know, I think that for me, that ability to, and that's the amazing thing about music. And one of the things I loved from the beginning was it gives you that gift of travel. It gives you the ability to go to places, and it gives you a way to communicate with people through music that, you know, you wouldn't have had. There's no way to have that experience, you know? So I feel really lucky that music has given me that, you know?
She has a really good attitude about life, Lance. It's making me feel guilty.
I know, it's weird.
At first I found it uplifting, and now it's starting to grate on me. So yeah, it's just,
I've heard of people.
It's just bringing my own human failures more into focus. So yeah, I think that's.
So we should make fun of a Canadian.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, good. Let's see you spin this positively, Donna. All right. So our dear friend Jens Lindemann, who is he's Canadian. He's from the Canadian capital of Toronto. Or Sydney, I can't remember. But he's been undergoing some serious job problems of late, and you just seem like such a positive person that it seems like you might be the one that could help him break through this. What I think we're all thinking at this point is some psychological issues. So anyway, what would you suggest to dear Jens?
I think my advice would be, and I'm sure he's probably been to Australia, but I think he should probably do a trip to Australia. He should head straight to the capital, Sydney, and he should get some Vegemite.
There you go.
He knows what Vegemite is. And he should put a nice thick layer on his chops, just a good thick layer. And, you know, just let it soak in. I think that would really
How
help.
long should he leave it applied for? Like a day?
I'd give it sort of, 15, 16 hours should do it. And, maybe sit on the beach.
The flight home. The flight home.
So a flight. So he could take the flight.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Let it soak in. I think that could be the answer.
There you go. See, Americans know what Vegemite is because of Men at Work.
They do.
That's the reason why we know
they
it.
do.
That's
and
true.
Can I just give everyone a tip with the Vegemite? If you ever are going to try the Vegemite, first of all, don't smell it. Many people make this mistake. They open
so many things in life that goes for.
They open it and they don't smell it. Don't smell it. And then when you use it, it's kind of similar to peanut butter in the same functions, right? But you've got to add some butter to the bread. You can't just, be putting the Vegemite on there. So a little butter and then a very thin layer of the Vegemite. People see it and they think it's going to be sweet and chocolatey. But it's actually delicious. But you've got to use it the right way. Don't smell it, and a light layer would be my advice.
Jens use butter as well on his face?
Yeah. No, I think he needs to go straight to the Vegemite. I mean, if it's been an ongoing issue, I think just, a solid layer of just the Vegemite.
Yeah.
I think
it's hanging out under his nose for 15 hours.
Like wax lips made out of Vegemite.
Oh, man. There you go.
I keep track of the topics while we're going so that I can put them in the show notes. And I just wrote life lesson, quote, don't smell it, period.
That's going to be my takeaway
It's
quote.
like the durian fruit of Australia.
Oh, the durian. No.
Oh, that's
Can you
right.
have you eaten
Yeah,
that? I can.
yeah,
There's
yes,
no way.
yes, we have.
You did?
Yeah, we ate it.
I couldn't.
Yeah.
I could not get. I could no.
We were full participants.
I couldn't get past that smell.
Yeah,
what can
see,
we make the stupid
Wow.
Americans eat was our favorite game. Because
Yeah, we've
Good
been
job.
There
in
was just
Singapore
nothing we
many
wouldn't
times,
try.
and the Tang Quartet are some dear friends of ours, and they took
Right.
us on a Screw with the Americans food tour, and there were three of us in the band that were like, "Bring it!" Yeah, so
Right.
we had,
Right.
and
As
they
you do.
tried, and they ended with the durian fruit, and I was like,
Oh,
we had made it that far, I mean, it was like, it kind of felt like, and I was never in a fraternity, but it felt like a fraternity hazing when this is like the last thing. And
You
yes,
felt
it's
the
horrible,
pressure.
but it's the last
Mhm.
thing. Like, I'm not going to let you win now.
You had
So-
to do it. Yeah, you had
And
to
it
do
actually tastes sweet.
No.
It tastes,
Yeah.
it's weird.
Mhm.
It tastes
We
sweet,
broke
but then your fingers afterwards. And
There is a reason you can't. There's a reason you can't take that
Don't
on public
smell it
transport.
first.
There's
there
a reason.
is a reason. And I think I
Right.
told this story once before on the podcast, which is 2 more times than it ever should be told on the podcast. But it turns out that that similar to asparagus, that durian fruit, that when you urinate afterwards, that it has a smell that you cannot forget if you try.
No.
We were our durian experience was on Halloween in Singapore, and we went to a British pub that was not very big afterwards.
Right.
And we were let's just say we drank a lot. So
Right.
we went to the
Right.
I mean, there were like 12 of us, and like everyone went
Like
to the
volume.
bathroom like 3 or 4 times.
No.
And at some
No.
point it was kind of like, wait, what's that smell? And then we realized that the smell had literally come from out of the bathroom and was slowly enveloping the entire pub.
Oh, those poor pub owners.
Oh, yeah, that's us.
Oh,
So
that's
businesses
terrible.
in Singapore should have signs up that say no durian and no durian urine. Yeah, it's like that was that durian.
Oh, there you go.
Durin.
That is a smell. I'm literally smelling it right now, which is really bad.
No,
Yeah, I can't.
no,
And that was
no.
10 years ago.
Well,
That was 10 years ago.
I'm impressed that you managed to eat it with the smell. I couldn't get past the smell. I must say, you're better people than me.
The texture
It was the
actually
combination
worse
of the
for me.
texture and the smell. I was like, I just
didn't want to let my friends
job,
win.
guys. Right. Yeah. Peer pressure will go a
Really,
long
That's
way.
it.
this is a bad
Yeah.
idea for everyone. I'm in. Yeah.
Let's do this.
Yeah. What? And when you like factor in,
Right.
okay, male,
Right.
check, Americans,
Yes.
check, low brass
Right.
players, check.
I mean,
drunk,
it was
check.
Those 4
Okay.
check marks, usually good
Gonna lose
decisions
it.
are made at that point. So, yeah.
Nothing but
Oh, good Lord. Well, all right. I think that, we segued from this beautiful uplifting, like talking about our wedding and then we went to like
Beautiful.
Yen's,
Yeah,
and then we went
drove her
to
right into the ground.
talking about smelling our urine in a British pub in Singapore. So, yeah, I think that seems like a nice, awkward place to end it. So,
Our work here is
Donna,
done.
thank you so much for. I didn't realize at the time when I reached out to you about this that you were like probably in the throes of planning a wedding that was happening like halfway around the world. So, so it all worked out great that that you were able to join us, and congratulations again on getting hitched.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
we are going to keep Donna on the line here for a quick bonus episode for our Patreon patrons. And that is going to do it for another episode of The Brass Junkies. You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to hear the bonus episode featuring today's guest, please visit patreon.com/thebrassjunkies to learn how you can support the show and instantly access all bonus materials, as well as gain access to a special patron-only Facebook group. The Brass Junkies is produced by the amazing, wonderful, and truly inspirational Will Houchin. The theme music was composed by Fernando Dados and performed by Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. LaDuke. We are at Pray for Jens on Twitter and Instagram and have a Facebook page at facebook.com/PrayForJens. You can find out more about the Brass Junkies and all the other Pedal Note Media podcasts at pedalnotemedia.com. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.